Board. And this is our second class for November. And the title of it is, Am I Organized Enough in My Paperwork Right Now? And we have two really great experts to discuss this with you today. You have all met one of them, and you've probably not met the other. The one you've met is Jerry Sprudy, who is the attorney that Elder Move Alliance has been using in our seminars for years now. And he's an elder law attorney, works on the east side, has an office in Duval, and I believe still one in Bellevue. And then our other speaker is Albert Israel, and he is with the Ameriprise. He's a financial planner and has been doing financial planning, I think, as long as I've been selling real estate, which is 30 years. So how long have you been doing?
35.
35, so longer. So both of them are going to be talking to you about getting organized and keeping things simple for yourselves, as well as anyone else who has to come in and help you ever with your affairs. So we're going to start today with Albert, and I'm going to turn the screen over to you. I am turning on screen sharing, and remember that one of our attendees cannot see it, so you're just going to have to really explain well.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm going to do more talking than showing, and forgive me. I know the lighting is a little dark here, but I hope I'm going to stand back. I hope you can see what I look like. I'm going to stand back in more light. So that's me, and I'm glad to be here. And Mindy, thank you so much for having me. I am a native Seattleite. I grew up in the South End near Seward Park, Rainier Beach. Grew up in Renton in that area. My father was also a native Seattleite, so grew up in the central part of town. So we've been around a long time, a long time. And I'm glad to be presenting here. And Mr. Barnett, I see you on the screen. Did you just call me? Was that you? Yes. All right. Good. I'm glad you made it. Good. And so I'm very glad to be here. I've been in the investment business since 1984. So 36 years. Time flies. It's been a fabulous experience. And the reason I enjoy it the most is because of the relationships with the people. That's the benefit of these long-term relationships, long-term businesses, is you have relationships with people that continue. So what I'm going to share with you is something I used to share. Also, I used to be on the radio, on KVI radio. Does anybody remember that show by chance? The KVI financial show with Albert Israel? It's been 20 years. No? Okay. It's been a long time. So it's not often that people bring it up, but it was a great experience. So I did host the show that was one of the weekend shows where they talk about the boating show or the interior design show or the home repair show or the boating show. That's what I hosted, was the financial show, financial equivalent of that. So it was a great experience on KVI radio. But now we're just working with clients one-on-one. And what I'm going to share with you today are some of the hints that I've experienced from people that have passed, and also people that I shouldn't say that have passed. People that are seniors in life, and then many of whom, as time has passed, have passed. And I've observed what made life easier and more difficult for the executors. So let me tell you about getting your house in line while you're alive, and then we're all going to go one day. When we go, what makes it easier for our executors? So first of all, do any of you have a notebook? A notebook, a red notebook, orange notebook, a notebook that's easy to find, that your executors, when you're gone one day, your children or your executor can look in the notebook and find your brokerage accounts, your bank accounts, the name of your attorney, Jerry Sprudy, or whomever it may be, the name of your investment advisor, your powers of attorney if you have them. Does anybody have a notebook like that?
I do.
All right, good.
Evelyn does.
Great.
Yeah, I do with, I actually have two of them.
Great. Very good. Good job. So that's the first step, is create the notebook, buy a 3-hole punch, create the notebook, and start, and also the dividers. So you can have dividers for investments, insurance, legal papers, powers of attorney, anything that you think, let's say you were a Boeing employee, Boeing retirement, anything that you think is pertinent can be in that notebook. So your executor can come and just look and say, oh, you work with Albert Israel at Ameriprise. Let me give him a call, tell him the unfortunate news that Mr. Jones has passed, but at least I know who to call. And what's also helpful is a sleeve like this. A sleeve like this, which is a sleeve with slots where you can put the business cards in them, or you can just staple them to the paper. But make sure you have the business cards with them there, or at least a printed copy of an email with the name and address, etc. Now, do any of you here have savings bonds?
I have I bonds.
I bonds. Okay. If they're not of size, I would encourage you to cash them in. Sure, you might pay a little tax, and sure, you might, and it depends. If they're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, then that's another subject. Give me a call. But in many cases, they're $3,000 here, $5,000 there, $9,000 here. If you have the physical bonds, if you have any physical bonds, I'd encourage you just to cash them in, put the money in the bank. Sure, you might not earn as much on that $8,000, but it's going to make, again, the paperwork for your executor much easier. Do any of you have any shares of stock held at transfer agents? The most common one is computer share. So if you're a Boeing employee, a former Boeing employee, or you're a former Microsoft employee, you may have shares held not in the brokerage account, but at what's called the transfer agent, the company that's back east that's hired by Microsoft, Boeing. Do any of you have any shares there?
Nope.
Okay, good. All right, because that's a real bear to move those later on after your passing. That's good. Do any of you have the stock certificates of shares? You do? Okay. So no, okay, one of you does, and maybe two of you do. So I encourage you to deposit those in a brokerage account, because that, again, is also a bear. When you pass, or when one of you passes, if it's in joint name, either you pass, or if it's in joint name, one of you passes, you're doubling or tripling the work of your executor when you have all these tentacles of assets, all these buckets of assets, especially one that's so legal-ish like a stock certificate. So I encourage you to take those certificates and deposit them with a brokerage firm. It could be Ameriprise, it could be Merrill Lynch, it could be Charles Schwab, whomever you want. But I encourage you to deposit them. Next is, do your people know each other? So does your accountant have the name of your attorney, who's got the name of your executor, who has the name of your children?
No.
Okay. And yeah, most of the time it's no. So here's an easy one for those of you on email, is send an email to all your parties, all the important parties. Say, hey, I just want you all to know each other. Please keep this in my paper file, or nowadays we have more electronic files. Please keep this in my electronic file. Here are the names of the people that are important to me. Should I become incapacitated, or should I pass on? Here's the name of my accountant. And you can do this all on one email, and just copy them all in and send it to all of them. And if you have 2 investment advisors, which many people do, or 3 different companies, don't be afraid to list them. Go ahead and list them. I mean, we're all mature enough that we want to communicate, and it shouldn't be much of a territorial issue. It's better that we're all communicating. So investment advisor 1, investment advisor 2, accountant, attorney, executor, child. Nice to talk, nice to communicate with you all. I'm doing my typing signs here. Nice to communicate with you all. I want you all to have each other's emails and phone numbers. At the very least, you'll have each other's emails when it comes to this issue. If I become incapacitated or I should pass, here's where my notebook is. And now you have each other's names and numbers, and you can call each other. That makes a big, big difference. And I will tell you, very few people do that. Very few. Now here's another one too, that's a little sensitive, but I just experienced this with a valued client who passed away at 89. And that is the right or wrong, good or bad, the children wanted the money right away. Now they were loving daughters. I'm going to tell you all, in fairness to them, I'm obviously not going to mention their name, They were all loving daughters, but they all bought home. Two of the three bought homes right away, new homes right away. So, and they were chomping at the bit for the funds. And it takes a lot of time to move the money from deceased to beneficiary. It could take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So, and you've got funeral expenses, you've got credit card bills that need to be paid. My suggestion also, and Jerry, please chime in on this when it's your turn, if you think this is a good idea. And if not, I want to hear it too, is have a side checking account with somebody you trust, a joint account with somebody you trust of, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000, 15, 20, 25. It's different for everybody, but enough money that you can, that your executor or your child, your executor, somebody can pay your bills for you. Now, Jerry, maybe you can address A, do you think that's a good idea? And then B, does that then becomes a part of the will. It's not like the money will disappear. It's still part of the will. But what it does do is it would have solved my client's family quite a few problems. I'll finish, Jerry, and then you want to chime in after I'm done. I'll just take one more minute. I just got one more thing. And then finally, oh, that was the last point. So that's it. That's how you stay organized. Get all your assets out of the house, basically. Don't store them in the house, A. So deposit those certificates and cash in, especially if it's a small amount, those savings bonds. Consolidate your accounts. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 accounts, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, maybe consolidate them to 1 or 2. Create that notebook and communicate with everybody. So everybody's on the same page. And on the, I know because Mr. Barnett called me. So on the flyer that you received are our phone numbers and likely email addresses, certainly phone numbers. So if any of you want to contact me, please feel free. There's no charge to chat on the phone. And we're meeting people like this by Zoom. We use Microsoft Teams, same idea. We can meet electronically and no obligation on your part or my part to chat for half an hour, an hour. We then hang up. You ponder if we can help you or not. You ponder it. If we can, you call us again and we go from there. So
what is your phone number?
206 926 5330.
All of the phone numbers of the speakers are on the newsletter that you've all received. You all got the newsletter. That's how you know about the seminar, I believe. And on the bottom of the newsletter, there are phone numbers for every one of our speakers.
And any questions about any of these issues, the certificates or staying organized or the notebook, anything?
This is Sue. I do have a question.
Yeah.
I have on my earphones, so I hope you can hear.
Perfectly.
Okay. I do have I-bonds and I bought them just about when there was a switch over. So the baseline I always get is 3%. Typically they're paying, then they add on something on top of it is 5%. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's a little lower, but it's always around that. And between all of them, I would say it's $100,000. That's pretty good percentage in this market. So why would I get rid of them to put them in something else that isn't paying as much as far as the dividends?
Well, you bring up a good point. And at that level, they're probably worth keeping if that's still the rate. I haven't looked into the rate in a long time. So if that is the rate, you're absolutely right. In that case, it's probably better to keep them. It's worth the little extra work. So what I was talking about before is the $2,000 values, the $5,000 values, the $7,000 values, that even if you earn an extra 3% on that, it's going to take your executor a lot more time to deal with them than that's worth.
And so it's always it's a floor plus whatever they add. So every 6 months it changes on an I-bond. But I always get 3+, and typically it's 5, and they were bought in smaller increments. So there's many 5s and 10s that equal totally all of that.
Yeah. Well, good point. In that case, maybe it's worthwhile to keep them.
Okay.
I have a question, Albert.
Yes.
Yeah, is there any alternative if you have some old double E savings bond to cash them, or is there any way to convert to something else?
You know, I don't know the double E savings bonds very well because we don't work in them here. But again, my message is the same. We can look online and see what the rate is. I can try to find that if you email me.
Yeah.
And Mindy, are the email addresses on the invitation too?
No, just a phone
No.
number.
Okay. Well, you can call and we can try to look online together
Okay.
at what the rate is. But then I get back to my same answer. If it's an attractive rate and you've got $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 or more, that's one thing. If it's an attractive rate and you've got $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and you're worried about an extra 2% of interest on $6,000, I would tell you that's probably not worth your while, because your executor will probably spend on all these extra odds and ends 6 or 8 or 10 hours, and it's not too profitable may not be worth their time for you to earn an extra $100 a year.
Yeah. Thank you.
Certainly.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was going through my mother's paperwork after she died, and I found a war bond in my name. And I called and they told me that it maxed out at $99. So did I get the straight info, or do you know?
I don't know. I've never seen one.
No, I took it into the bank. They had never seen one either. Everybody in the bank came over to look at it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it may be more valuable as a piece of art. That sounds fabulous.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And it has a mouse chewed a hole in it, so it's even more
great.
valuable.
Right.
Yeah, but historical document, you can donate it to a museum.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Right. All right, folks.
Albert,
well,
I'm sorry, excuse me, go ahead.
No, I was gonna wrap up, but please, Mr. Bell, go ahead.
Okay, it's Sam.
Sam. Yes.
Anyway, when in the last few years of my mom's life, we did some checking about her will and found that if my name was on her accounts, then she wasn't able to leave any money to other people that she wanted to leave money to. So we hightailed it down to the bank and took my name off of everything but one small account where I could do what you had said previously, to take care of any last minute bills or whatever. And so then she had money to leave to her friends and others. It never would have occurred to me that because my name was on the account there, then she wouldn't have been able to exercise her money in the way that she wanted to.
Right. Jerry, maybe you can handle that. You can address that when you speak, and that is that the titling of accounts. Besides that small checking account that we're talking about, the titling of accounts.
Yeah,
That's
there
a very
are
good
other
point.
problems with putting your name on everything, and Jerry can address that as well.
Okay. Well, folks, it's been a pleasure. Any other last questions? I'm going to stick around, but.
Thank you very much.
Helpful.
Very helpful.
Pleasure. Good. It's my pleasure.
Okay, and both our speakers will be here at the end. So if questions come up while Jerry's talking and you want to address either of our speakers, you can. And with that, we'll turn over the screen to Jerry Sprudy, as I mentioned, an elder law attorney and also a tax expert. So here's Jerry.
Good morning. Thanks, Mindy. And I'm going to apologize just to start out with. I'm out here in Duval. We've had some pretty heavy winds and my audio keeps cutting in and out a little bit. So hopefully you've got a nice, good live stream here of me, but if I cut out intermittently, I'm sure I'll hear about it. So Albert, I think you made a really great suggestion, a great point that I don't want to get lost here. Number one, when he's talking about, when Albert mentioned, maybe Series I bonds or this computer share account, as an attorney that helps people wind up their affairs, I often see when dad passes or when mom passes, they have maybe one or two primary or significant financial accounts. This is where the investment account is. This is where the IRA or the 401k is. And then they may have 5 or 6 miscellaneous checking accounts, or just like a loose stock somewhere that really, you know, maybe there was a purpose when we opened the account, but there really isn't a purpose now. So the idea of consolidating without, I think, like Sue was saying, right, without shooting ourselves in the foot, but the idea of consolidating and saying, why do we have this account? Do we need this many open investment or checking or savings accounts? Or does it make sense to put more of our stuff together, right? The idea in retirement is not to make it more complicated. It's not to have a dozen different statements that we have to reconcile every month. It's to make life a little bit easier for ourselves, a little bit easier for our power of attorney, a little bit easier for our executor. So, and I think that was a primary point that Albert was making. You know, do we need all this stuff? Does it make sense to keep it all? And if it's there just because we've always had it, maybe it's time to start consolidating that. I deal with ComputerShare, and they're not the most pleasant company to deal with sometimes when we're working as a power of attorney, when we're working as an executor. So, and then the other thing I think that Albert mentioned that we'd like to talk about before we get a little further along is this idea of a checking account that you have that you own jointly with maybe your executor or your power of attorney.
I would rather listen by phone if I can, because it's breaking up and I can't understand it. Thank you.
We can hear you okay.
Oh,
Can you guys hear me okay? Most
Yes.
everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
The idea of having a joint account with maybe a child or, you know, this trusted individual, understand you are doing some estate planning when you do this. A joint account works like this. I own an account with my spouse, or I own an account with my child. And if I'm the first to die, they inherit that account. It is their account. And because they are an owner who has not died, the entire account becomes theirs.
oh, 215.
Where I see that,
8, 7.
hey, John, do you have the ability to mute?
You need to put in the Zoom class number, which is 4.
And
See if I
maybe,
can mute him.
we'll just keep going.
Okay. Say, you know, I think I won't.
So if you do have that person on your account as a joint owner, then they will inherit that account. It can make for an easy transition as soon as you pass, where we have immediate access to funds. What do we need money for right away? Right? What do we need it for right away? Final expenses, funeral and memorial, buying the flowers, contracting with the funeral director, these types of things.
215, I think it's
And maybe
8782. Okay.
you know, the power bill. There are some miscellaneous things that we do want to make sure can be taken care of, maybe for the first couple of months. So there's no need to have a large amount of money in this. But if you do have what I think of as your everyday checking, right? This is where the Social Security gets deposited. This is where the pension gets deposited. And this is where the automatic bill pays are happening, right? Where we're paying our bills, and there's never really a whole lot in there. We're not using it as our emergency fund account. We're not using it as our investment account. What we're using it for is to pay bills every month. If you have someone on that account, it can make for a pretty easy transition or a smoother transition at the time you pass, because we do have money. Otherwise, one of your kids is going to have to pull out the credit card and pay for those expenses, and then get reimbursed once we get started on probate issues. So that's getting organized. One of the things that you want to take a look at is who you have a joint account with, right? Because keep in mind, if it is a joint ownership account, it's going to go to that person. And it's up to them what they want to do with the money. Do we want to spend it on these final expenses? Do I want to keep it and pay off my mortgage? Do I want to split it with the rest of the, brothers and sisters that, was the intent? So keep an eye on that. And along with that, you know, who do you have as a beneficiary on your financial accounts, on your investment accounts? I think that's another way, or another easy thing to overlook, right? Who do we have listed as a life insurance beneficiary? Because you may have a will that says one thing, but a beneficiary that says something entirely different. That's okay, but that has to be a decision we make, and not something that, whoops, we forgot to change that when we changed up our will, you know, a few years ago. So getting organized, and the idea of, how many of you have a power of attorney? Everybody should have a power of attorney. Yep. The idea of a power of attorney is to say, if I need someone to step in and make decisions for me, if I don't have my own voice, I want to say who that person's going to be. They're going to need to make a medical decision. They're going to need to make sure my bills are paid. They're going to need to step in and run my life as best they can when I can't do it for myself, right? So your power of attorney document gives someone the ability to make these decisions, gives someone the legal authority to manage. And the biggest question then becomes, what am I managing? What am I in charge of? And this is what I like to call your personal folklore. A lot of the stuff that Albert was talking about with your notebook. I sent out an email to a couple of you? Hopefully you have that. And I'm going to see if I can't screen share here for a second. Technology is a fifth language for me. So bear in mind, I'm new at this. Let's see what we can do. Share my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
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 Cool. So we start out with, and this is when I do some estate planning for clients and say, hey, great, we've got a will, we've got your power of attorney in place, you've got the right people to make decisions. Now let's put a tool in their hands that they can actually start to work if they need to, right? The last thing we want is for them to sort of be like a deer in the headlights and say, oh my gosh, I just got a call and dad's in the hospital, you know, where do I start? You know, what on earth am I supposed to do? Letter of instruction to my executor, to my power of attorney. If there's something specific you want someone to know, right? Write it down. This isn't a legal document. This isn't going to control who gets your estate, but you know, maybe I have a cat that needs shots, right? And no one knows that. And I'm not going to put that in a will, but someone needs to be able to access that information. That's the kind of things I'm thinking of here. Apparently, you know, you can always write out what they like to call an, or maybe you've heard of as an ethical will, where you're explaining your reasoning behind, you know, why didn't I leave, you know, why did I cut out the horrible son, or, you know, do some other estate planning stuff. What I want to do is say, hey, what does my power of attorney need to know, right? The stuff that I know that no one else does. Taking a look here at important health information, and this is overlooked way too often. Who's my health insurance through, right? What's my, you know, what's my policy number? Where can you maybe find my health insurance card? Who's my primary care doctor? Am I seeing a specialist? Am I allergic to any medications, right? Is there a specific treatment that I would or would not want to have happen?
Jerry, is it possible to get the copies of those sheets you are talking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you have an email address and are comfortable typing it into the comment section, I will absolutely email it to you. Otherwise, feel free to, if you know how to privately message, you can, I will absolutely mail this out to you too. So
I have their email too now. I'll share it with you.
Okay.
I'll absolutely
That's one
send
of the
this
ones
out
I
to
just
everybody.
got.
Thank you.
Because this is the information. What you're saying is, I have a power of attorney, or I know who my executor is, what control, how can I make their job easier, right? So don't worry about writing any of this down. I will absolutely mail this out to you if you want it. So, you know, important health information, and we want to be able to change this. So we don't put this in the power of attorney. We don't put this in our will because our information may update. And I've got one for, you know, client 1 and client 2, husband and wife. And then important paperwork, right? Where can you find the title to the car? Where can you find last year's tax return? Where can you find, my military discharge paperwork or my estate planning documents? Any sort of important paperwork that we might have. Maybe we have Series E bonds or Series I bonds, these things that are, they're like money, right? Where do we have those kept? Because it's physical paper that we need to redeem. For those of you that are following along, how many of you have your important paperwork in the safe deposit box?
The will's in a safe deposit box.
Yep. So you've got your will in a safety deposit box. One of the things super important, if you have a safe deposit box, who has access to that safety deposit box? Have you put your power of attorney or have you put your executor on as an authorized person? Right, I have a case right now where mom passed away in the Spokane area, and we think the will is in the safe deposit box, but there's nobody else authorized to open it. So we have to go to court and get a judge's order to crack open the safe deposit box to see if there's a will.
It's very expensive.
To see if we can start approving. So, and that's after mom has passed, right? And if it takes us an extra month to get the will, it's not the end of the world. But what if you have your power of attorney document in the safe deposit box and something happens and your power of attorney needs the document and they can't access it? So having a safe deposit box, it can be very, very helpful and handy, but we want to make sure maybe we've got somebody authorized to open the box besides ourselves. So, where can we find important paperwork? Asset information. Nobody needs to know how much money is in the bank accounts. No one needs to have actual account numbers or PIN numbers or anything sensitive, but they do need to know where to go with the power of attorney. Where do I take this? Or as the executor, right? We don't want it to be a scavenger hunt on where, where the assets are. Do we still have a life insurance policy? Did we close that account that we saw a statement from, 2018? So we want to have a good, accurate list of our assets. Where is the account? Who would I contact? And whose name is it in? That's really all someone would need to know. Where do I take the power of attorney, or who do I contact with if I'm the executor? And the rest of it can be discovered, right? If we know that there's an account over at Albert's office, or we've got, our regular checking account at Wells Fargo or BECU, we know where to go with our legal documents. Again, we don't want, if this information falls into the wrong hands, God forbid your house gets broken into and the one thing they steal is your estate plan, then they're not going to get the sensitive information, right? They're not going to be able to access anything. We just want our power of attorney to know where to go. Liabilities and expenses. Everybody knows that you get a cell phone bill or a power bill or the water bill, but am I making am I paying on a long-term care policy? Is there a car payment or something else that might be overlooked, right? And then who are the important people as far as professionals, clergy, financial people, who did my taxes last year, and a mini phone book so that my side of the family knows how to get a hold of my wife's side of the family. And then I've got information on final arrangements, funeral, memorial, and things like that. That's really, that's my idea of how to get organized, right? Just some basic information. The idea being that if I have a power of attorney, this person that I've trusted to make a decision for me, have I given them enough information to get started, right? And as I've developed this over the years, there's other things that I'd like to put in there that I haven't quite yet. When we're talking about aging in place, when we're talking about moving to a retirement community, when we're talking about that next phase in life, making a list of contacts of resources that you are comfortable with. And what I'm talking about, maybe if you're thinking about, hey, am I going to stay in my house forever? Then if my house needs to be ready for me to stay here, I might need to do some modifications. right? Depending on my physical limitations, I may need some grab bars in the shower. I may need a ramp to get up through the front door, right? I may need some of these things done. Today, while you don't need it, you can do your own research and figure out what companies, what people that you're comfortable working with. If you're thinking of making a move, right, you can make that move on your own terms, and you can start doing your own research and saying, hey, you know, if I needed to move to if I needed to go to a rehab facility, right, after an accident, if I needed to go, you know, into an independent living, or maybe I needed some more advanced care, where, you know, where am I comfortable? You can do all that research yourself. If I needed an in-home care person for a while, right? Someone to help out for a little bit, who would I call? The people that you put in charge want to make the best decision for you. And if you can give them enough, you know, if you can give them some tools so that they're not starting out, you know, opening up the yellow pages and saying, okay, you know, where do I start? Or calling their friend of a friend who had a similar kind of situation that they heard about, right? And, you know, maybe you do your own information, get your own information together, you do your own research while you can, right? So you say, hey, here's who you can work with. Here's a good place to start if you need to be my power of attorney. And I think that's, you know, that's kind of all I wanted to cover this morning, and I'll open it up for some questions.
Jerry, this is Sue. I do have some questions.
Hey, Sue.
Hi. I have a joint checking account with my 2 children, and I only have 2 children. I keep a fair amount at Bank of America in both checking and savings combined, just to make life easier. So if I pass away, that is still going to count as part of my estate, even though they are owners on it. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, where it goes after you die is different than what did you have the second before you took your last breath. So the IRS will tax everything in your estate. When it goes to a joint owner, that just says where it goes after we've passed. Yep.
So my question is, because they're joint on it, I'm counting on the fact they can use whatever they need to take care of everything at the end, even though it's
Sorry,
after
Steve,
I passed.
you cut out on me for a second there.
Okay, so I put them on it so that if I passed away, no matter what the expense was in either selling a house or whatever, it could be fairly large, they can just write checks against that. But if I've passed away, can they still write checks against a joint account?
They should be able to. It's the proof positive on that question is to talk to your is to talk to the bank. And if they are an actual owner, a joint owner.
They are, they're equal. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's sometimes, you know, it's terminology. If you go to the bank and say, hey,
no, you're cutting out.
I want to put my 2 kids on my bank account.
Right.
The bank will do one of 2 things. They'll say, I'm putting them on as a signer, which means they have no legal authority after you pass. Or the bank says, I'm putting them on as an owner. And then after you pass, they still have equal access to that.
Right. Yeah, they're owners, and they're also the beneficiaries.
Yep. So okay. That's their money that they can do whatever they want with. If they decide not to pay your bills with it, that's their decision jointly.
Right.
But your bills don't go away. They're going to have to find another way to pay those.
Sure. I just wanted to be sure they could use it all after I passed away. I don't know if I answered
your question. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second one is the power of attorney, the financial and healthcare. The last one that was done was 2012. How often do they have to be updated?
Your 2012 power of attorney did not go bad, right? It's still a legally valid document.
Right.
And it kind of depends on how well it was drafted.
Well, you did it.
I'm sorry?
You did it.
I recognized you, Sue. I didn't want to,
I mean, so you know what's in it.
I think it's I think it's okay. So we did that after your husband passed, right?
No, before. He passed away in 2016.
Oh, that's right. That's right. It depends. Getting that updated isn't a bad idea, but it's not necessary because it's still legally valid. It's still It still is entirely in line with Washington law. I think a power of attorney, the older it gets, the more likely it's going to be challenged by the financial institution or by the hospital. And how old is too old? That's the hardest question to answer. My general rule of thumb is about, maybe every 5 or 7 years you get it dusted off and you have it redrafted or updated. But it's still a perfectly valid document.
And then on a safe deposit box, they also are joint. I mean, any one of them can sign for it. It's quite a process. Everybody has to be there, the three of you at the right time. I mean, it's not an easy thing. So you'd want to leave lots of time if your kids aren't right next in the neighborhood. But can they empty it after I pass because they can sign and get into it? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of those, you've got, $1 million in gold bullion. No one's the wiser. They just go in like the movies. They go in with a duffel bag and they clean it out and they close.
Right, I wish.
So
okay, thank you.
The one issue is they could empty it now, right?
Sure.
If their names are on it, they can empty it now.
That's the one. We put a lot of trust in the people that we authorize on these. So
right.
Okay.
Yeah, my personal philosophy is, look, if you would trust them to do this stuff after you're gone, or if you're incapacitated, you should trust them not to exercise that authority while you're still in charge and looking over their shoulder.
Right.
Yep.
And I have, I guess, one other question related to the joint savings account. We're limited to $15,000 a year in gifting to each member, or whoever you want to give it to. Can they write checks? Sometimes I'm reimbursing them because I'm on either the cell phone account or, whatever. Is there any question that could be part of what they consider your gifting?
So a reimbursement is not a gift, right?
No, I mean, but they're writing the check to themselves,
right.
And that's not a problem. How do they distinguish between a gift? How do they know if I wrote a check for $3,000 to reimburse them for all the things I'm on that they're paying for,
Sure.
that that's not part of a gift?
So it all has to do with audits and proof to the IRS is what it comes down to,
okay.
Right? Because the IRS is never gonna send you a letter saying, hey, I see that you made $15,000 in gifts. Where did it go? It's all about reporting. So if they do come back, if the IRS does come back in some sort of audit and say, hey, I see that you wrote $20,000 worth of checks out of this account to your son, then it would be, you would go back and say, well, it was, here's the receipt for this and for that and for the other thing that he paid for. So,
okay.
A real quick note on gifting. There is no Washington state gift tax.
Right.
Meaning you could give everything away. You could give $1 million to one of your kids, and the state of Washington would not collect a million tax on a gift tax or a transfer tax. The federal gifting limit is tied to the inheritance tax. It's what they call a unified credit. Without getting too technical, each of you has a ledger with the IRS that says, we don't care if you leave it as an inheritance or you give it during your lifetime, you have just over $11 million to play with. $11.4 million per individual. So you can give away $1 million, $2 million, $5 million in a year if you wanted to, and not pay any tax. The $15,000 that Sue mentioned, that's the number you hear from your accountant. And what that means is you can give $15,000 in a calendar year to any one person before you have to do paperwork, before you have to report it to the IRS and subtract it from your lifetime $11 million. Does that make sense? So if you gave away $1 million, if you said, hey, I'm going to give my daughter $1 million, there would not be a gift tax in Washington, and you wouldn't have to pay a gift tax at the federal level if you filed the form saying, I gave $1 million this year, subtract it from my $11 million exemption. But if you gave her $10,000, you wouldn't have to file any paperwork at all.
Right.
Kenmore, Will, and Caroline, you both have questions.
Okay, Will, I have a quick question regarding Sue was talking about having kids on your account. We fully trust our kids, but is there any way without hurting their feelings to tell them not to use any of the funds before we die? Like they won't be writing any checks or anything.
I hope that you wouldn't hurt their feelings. Just say, this money's not yours. So I put you on there for convenience and it's not yours to spend. So please, in case of emergency.
Okay. So just
That's
talk
it.
to them about
and hopefully that's exactly what they do.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Because, and from an IRS perspective, either we trace the money to its origin. We say, okay, who put the money in? Where did all this money come from? Whose is it really? When we're talking about taxes. Or you say, I just made a gift, right? I just gave my kids half the account. And usually we think about it as tracing the origin, right? So when you add your child on the account as a joint account owner, you don't fill in paperwork saying, hey, I just gifted, $30,000 to my child, right? We don't do that. We just say, hey, look, that's my money. They're now on the account, so they have access. So hopefully, we instill upon our children the importance of needing that as an emergency access and not as a, slush fund that you can, go to Target with. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Carolyn.
My question is, I recently fell in love. I'm a widow. My husband's estate was all my responsibility and I'm almost done handling it. He has some money in Vanguard and Morgan Stanley that I have not been able to successfully fully put in my name yet. But everything's going well in my life, but I have not yet declared my new partner my power of attorney. So I have two grown children, one of whom lives nearby, who is my power of attorney at the moment. But it would make more sense to have my new partner. And I'm just not sure how to handle that.
You were cutting in and out a little bit, and that's my fault. But I think what I heard is that you've got, you've got a new person, a significant other in your life, and this is a long-term thing, and you've got kids that are your power of attorney. And how do we address that issue? Is that about it?
Yeah, I want my partner to be my power of attorney.
But absolutely, yeah.
But we're not married. It's too soon. We both have grown children that are, going to be our heirs. So getting married might not be in our interest.
And Jerry, Caroline said that it's a new
absolutely. And keep in mind when we draft up our documents, that's the beautiful thing is we can direct how we want things to work. So with a will is different than a power of attorney, where your power of attorney says who's in charge of my stuff while I'm alive, and it has nothing to do with inheritance plan. So if you do name this life partner, this significant other, as your power of attorney, you're saying, while I'm alive, if I need someone to step in, you're going to be in charge. And at the time you pass, those powers of attorney can be thrown away. They have no more legal authority. Now we're looking at the executor. Now we're looking at the will and the inheritance plan, where you may even have, your son or your daughter, your executor, and your kids as your heirs. So you say, hey, who am I most in touch or in connection with right now? If I needed someone to go to the hospital with me, or make a medical decision, or manage the finances, it would be this significant other. My kids, they will inherit because that's, what I want to do. So we won't change the will, but we can absolutely update the powers of attorney to have that person as the first in charge. Really important, if that's the person you want to do, that you put them in there. if you don't have a power of attorney, sometimes the kids can do a workaround, right? Because they're blood related, and it kind of depends on who you talk to. But the person with no, relation, no blood relation, they're just out in the cold. And we would hate for your child to deny access, right? Especially in like a medical situation. They say, no, you can't go see my mom, right? So to have them in as a power of attorney, could make some sense. Carolyn, I like to, just to mention this briefly, I separate the power of attorney into two different functions. We've got one that manages the finances, who's going to make sure the bills are paid, who's going to manage the retirement account, who's going to file the tax returns or register my car, right? That's your financial power of attorney. And then a second power of attorney that says, who's going to take care of me? Who's going to sign admission papers to the hospital or authorize a medical procedure or manage medications or hire an in-home caregiver? So we can have two different people to do this. If you say, look, I want to keep my daughter or my son in charge of the money, but I want this significant other to be the personal medical decision maker, we can do that too. Hopefully that was more information and answered all the questions that you had there.
And all of those should have first person and backup, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
you can put your significant other in as your power of attorney, but your child in as the backup. You don't want the person you ride around in the car with the most often to be the only one you're relying on.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry, can you talk about the Washington State estate tax in general terms? Many of us are in that position with a nice house and a rental house and an IRA, and we're there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not hard these days to get close to the Washington State estate tax limit. So when we talked a little bit about gifting, and you had $11 million to play with at the federal level, right? You can leave $11 million as an inheritance. You can leave $11 million gifted during your lifetime, or any combination. That's for the federal estate and gift tax. Here in the state of Washington, the amount you can leave to your heirs is $2.2 million per individual. $2,195,000. It's $2 million adjusted for inflation, to get technical, and it hasn't changed in a couple of years. So our nice round number is 2.2 million that you can leave as an inheritance before the state of Washington says, hey, I think we get a piece of this. You can leave an unlimited amount to your spouse. So if Jeff Bezos dies and leaves everything to his wife, I don't even know if he's married, then there's no Washington estate tax, there's no federal estate tax. But at the time the spouse passes, now we're going to tax the whole thing. So if you're around the 2 million mark, or if you're over the 2 million mark, some easy but important planning that we want to put in place, or make sure was in place, is the idea of a tax trust. The idea of doing some easy tax where we can leave everything to the spouse, but have it sort of put some of it to the side for tax purposes. And it's just important planning that we can do to avoid the Washington estate tax. So each of you can leave $2 million, but we don't want to leave so much to our spouse that they have more than 2 million when they die. And we do that with a little bit of tax planning in your will. How confusing was that?
Gary, let me just say, since my husband passed in 2016, it was a nightmare dealing with the IRS and the Washington estate tax when my husband passed. It was 1.5 years, and they kept asking for more documents and more documents, which I had, and I could send them. And finally, both of them cleared fine. I never could understand that, because you can leave unlimited to your spouse. Why it took them so long, and why they kept asking for so much additional that I'd have to get the CPA involved in, and then we'd write letters, and it was a long, very frustrating process.
Yeah, and it's something it's more of a recent phenomenon, Sue. With what happened there, just generally speaking, we leave everything to the spouse. It's a return that gets filed, or an information that gets filed, and nobody really cares. except for when we do that tax planning, when we activate a tax trust where the spouse is still in control, but we've separated ownership purely for tax reasons. And it has to do, the complication had to do, or has to do with the change in the way the tax laws have developed over the last maybe 5 or 10 years, where the state of Washington didn't used to have their own estate tax. That's fairly recent. What used to happen was the federal government would collect the estate tax and then send some of it over to the state of Washington. Now we have the state of Washington that collects a tax, potentially, and the federal government that says, oh, we don't really even need to worry about it. So the state of Washington is starting to ask for a lot more documentation and a lot more verification. And I think they're still getting used to the process, even 4 years, 5 years after they've instigated that. So it's a lot of follow-up, it's a lot of proof, it's a lot of documentation, which we never really had to do for the state. And it's not fun.
Any other questions for either of our speakers? They're both here and ready to answer.
I noticed one thing that wasn't mentioned was the green sheet that we're supposed to have stuck to our refrigerator. So if we are in need of emergency care, there are directions there to be followed.
Sure, Sam, I think what you're talking about there is a POLST form. The POLST form, and that stands for Physician's Order on Life-Sustaining Treatment. That is the sort of the people call it a DNR, right? And it works alongside your medical power of attorney. It works alongside your living will. It's not a replacement for either of those, but it's written for first responders.
Right.
If the EMT comes bursting through the door because you're having a medical emergency, they want to know right away, do I perform CPR? Do I do any sort of heroic measures, life-sustaining treatment to get this person to the hospital and on the road to recovery? That's why it's that fantastic lime green. It stands out, and it's why it's very easy to read. Right? The EMT is not going to say, well, gosh, I heard that Sam had a power of attorney or he's got this living will. Let's rifle through the study and see if we can't find a copy. And then let's try and decipher what the lawyer said in 4 pages, right? Right. And by that time, there's no decision because you're dead. So the idea of the POLST is to give us immediate information. It's something that is reviewed and signed by you and your medical professional. That's your doctor or your physician's assistant. And it can be changed fairly easily. Anytime you go into the doctor's office, you can update your wishes. The idea is to say, if I had a medical emergency, what kind of treatment would I want? Again, it doesn't say who's in charge or who would make a medical decision if you couldn't, but it does give that immediate information to the first responders. I think it's important. It's an important piece to have. Yeah. And where we usually keep that is maybe on the side of the fridge or on the inside of the front door. Those are the 2 places that the EMT, that the emergency personnel is going to look for it. Yeah, if you filled one out and you've put it in with your estate documents, it doesn't do you any good. So we want to have it visible. But of course, it's not the most pleasant, home decoration that you would have, framed it all over the house either. So, yep.
But it's also a discussion you want to have with the people around you so that they know what you want as well and where to find your POLST.
Jerry, when my husband was ill, before that, I gave Overlake Hospital, which happens to be where all our doctors are too, and they scanned in the power of attorney. And of course, they had the POLST form that made it so much easier when he was in the hospital. So I don't know if all hospitals do that, but my understanding is you give them the power of attorney and they have it as part of your record.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I get that question every once in a while. People say, well, hey, I've got this power of attorney signed, and where does it get filed? Where does it get filed? It doesn't officially get filed with like the state or the county. We want to be able to change those as our wishes change. But to put your medical power of attorney on file with your regular doctor is a great idea. To put your financial power of attorney on file with your investment advisor or at the bank is a pretty good idea too. Absolutely, to give a copy to the person we've named so that it's not a secret, so that they do have immediate access to that document is also a good idea. And I'm glad that worked out, Sue. It's a great idea and too many people overlook that. Yep.
Can Sue repeat the procedure, what she did, what they did before her husband passed? Sue, what did you do with Overlake?
Oh,
I mean, you could do this anytime because you might all of a sudden need surgery. When you have your power of attorney for healthcare, you have them scan it in. So if you're taken to a hospital, there's no question about the decision making. I mean, I think that would be done at all hospitals. The post form was done with the doctor because you need a doctor that you're discussing your final wishes on that green post form. It was the doctor. I mean, all my doctors are at Overlake. So that was on record there too. So that made it much easier in my case anyway, when we were making difficult decisions, because the doctor who wants to keep questioning, you're sure you know what you want, he could see the instructions had been there on file. He knew about it before he talked to me.
Okay, thank you.
I think Overlake requires a post form if you're having something where there's time to do one. You know, it's not an emergency. They require you to do one before they admit you. And you all have them. If you've been to our live seminars, you know, back in normal times, we gave you all post forms.
Yeah,
Well, I had surgery at Overlake a year ago, May, and they did not request one for me.
Huh, okay. I wonder if they already have one on file.
Not for me. They did for my husband.
Okay.
You look really healthy, Sue. I think Albert mentioned this, I think in his talk too, about introducing your kids or your next in line to the people that you work with, to your professionals, right? Mm-hmm. Probably Albert gets this every once in a while where the power of attorney calls and says, hey, I need to take some money out of the account. And Albert says, who are you, right? How do I know? I mean, I just talked to my client 2 months ago and they seemed fine, right? The idea of having a power of attorney is to give someone the ability to manage for you. And we want to make it easy. And one of the things we can do is introduce them to our financial advisor, introduce them to our CPA, introduce them to our, to our regular doctor, so that it's not a surprise call, so that they can become familiar with the planning that you have in place. And when Albert gets that call, it's not out of the blue and they maybe already have somewhat of a relationship. Having the power of attorney on file is a great idea. That introduction is going to go one step further and make it all that easier.
Right.
Yep. Well, I think this has been a great talk, guys. If you have questions, I know Albert's available and I'm available. My email here, I'll put up on the screen for a couple of minutes. Be happy to answer questions, one-on-one if you guys have them. Otherwise,
stay up long enough.
Jerry, you muted yourself.
I did. I'm done for the day.
Okay. Any questions for Albert or Jerry before we end the seminar?
No, thank you very much. It's very helpful.
This was a really interesting one. Okay.
This is fun. Thank you. Thank you much.
Thanks,
all of you.
If no one else has any questions, then I think that we will bring this to a close. Remember that all of the contact information for our speakers is on the bottom of your newsletter that you got to invite you to this seminar. And we're thrilled that you all came today. This is great. Our next seminar is going to be tomorrow, and it's on where should I go if I sell. We'll talk about the options that are available to you, how much they might cost, how you're going to work your finances in order to get from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that will be excellent as well. It's at 1:30. And again, I'll remind you, if you have friends that you think would benefit from these seminars, please invite them. The more people we have, the better questions we get. And the better questions we have, the more information we get out. A lot of times, the best information that we give out during a seminar comes to an answer to a question. And plus, if you invite your friends and you haven't seen them for a while, you'll get to see them. So how much fun will that be? So I think this has been an excellent seminar, and I want to thank you all so much for coming. This was a really good attendance as well.
Mindy, can I share some good news before we part?
Sure.
I'm in downtown Seattle, 5th and Pike, and the streets are calm. There's no demonstrations, there's no looting. It's a nice change. Yes, calm streets.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us who won the presidency.
No.
I had a client in this morning and they said that their candidate was ahead in the polls.
Okay, both of them are saying that.
Yeah,
I
right.
still don't know who they voted for.
Right. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for coming. This has been excellent. And hopefully we'll see some of you or all of you or more of you even tomorrow. And then you can check the back of your newsletter to see all the other seminars that we have this month. I don't expect we'll be doing it in December. We'll start again in January. And then hopefully we'll all get vaccinations right away and we can start having our live seminars again. That would be great. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mindy.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.